Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office Hours. If you're watching on YouTube, you can find out more about what we do at officehours.global. Our first hour is general discussion about media production, and our second hour is usually something we want to spend a little bit more time on. And today we're going to talk about the migration of the Office Hour system. You may not have noticed, but we moved last week, a week ago, from one whole hardware system to another whole hardware system and barely missed a beat. And we're going to talk about that process and what it's taken and where we're still working on it and where it's going in the second hour. So if you've got questions about that, go ahead and throw those into the second hour in Makana. If you've got general questions, you can throw those in Makana. You can vote on them in Makana. But if you don't even know what Makana is, it's okay. You can just ask. You can just use this right here. So the QR code there, you can use the QR code or go to askofficehours.global and ask your question there, and then we'll feed those questions into our system. And you can do that 24/7. So anytime you think of a question, you can just go to askofficehours.global, throw that in, and then we will put it into the show. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the first question. Bill, what do we have?
And our first question comes in through the QR code system. It's our highest rated one this morning. Junior Grant in New York City says, "Good morning, Office Hours, the best engaging platform in my opinion. Alex, in yesterday's session, you mentioned the need for a piece of hardware between two virtual Dante sound cards. Can you expand on the hardware and especially the multi-channel ones?"
Yeah, so it's not between; it's just in the system. So the Dante, what we have found, it shouldn't be this way, but what we have found is that there needs to be one of the Dante chips in the system to keep it clocked correctly. And so we noticed that if any Audinate piece of hardware or any chip is somewhere in the system, everything seems to work fairly smoothly. If we don't have any of them in the system, we end up with a variety of anomalies. Go ahead, Jeff.
Not a we found it thing. It's a requirement. It's a requirement by Audinate because they're using one of their chips as a leader for the rest of the devices that are in the system. So, and when I say system, that means something on the network that's all visible by all the different Dante devices that are there. So there's always a leader, and it has to be hardware. I'm sorry, hardware or VIA, but nobody wants to use VIA, so don't do that.
So don't use VIA. No one wants to use VIA. We love you, Audinate. We do not. That's not gone well. So good, Tlaloc.
At risk of being too generic here, I just want to say what the reason for this is that you're sending packets of audio all around a network, and you've got to sort of line them up, right? Because it takes time for things to go from one place to another, and so there has to be a sync set that it has one place that it's getting that sync clock from. And as we know, clocks on computers, they have their own minds. And so we're just trying to get that clock to line up, and Dante is very, very strict about making sure that that's lining up and coming from one place so that there's not any sync problems or weird sound problems. And Jeff, please, or Alex, please jump in if that's wrong.
And the reason it's so strict is because it's running at zero latency. So it's running or near zero latency. And so there's just no room for error. So it has to be just right or it's not going to work. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Gordon Lake in Los Angeles, California. And Gordon says, Caleb over a DSLR video shooter built a recorder bay that seems to function better than the Blackmagic solution. Would you agree? And he's got a link there to it.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Well, it does a lot of neat things. I took a look at the video. I didn't have a chance to watch the whole 30 minutes. I can show you what it looks like. He's got a 4RU case. He's got 4 hyperdecks in there and a hyperdeck bay to hold the mini drives, the SSD drives, and a MixPre 3. And the mystery thing that seems to hold it all together is this magic little button over here on the end. If you can see where our mouse is pointing, it looks like it says Sony on it, and I think it's a USB switch that switches a gang of USB connections between 2 different sources. And the way he has it wired up is when you hit record on any one of the hyperdecks, it rolls all of them, and it also rolls the MixPre 3 as well. And when you hit stop, they all stop. But the neat thing is when you press the little button on the Sony thing, it switches the USB input. Well, maybe it's not USB. Maybe it is. Anyway, all the drives go from being plugged into the hyperdeck to being plugged into the network card. So then they all show up on this Mac Pro. He's got hooked up to the network over here. They mount. All 4 drives mount, and then he can drag the files he just recorded off onto the MacBook. And then when he's ready to record again, he just hits that little button on the Sony, and it reconnects all the drives back to the HyperDecks, and he has access to record once again. So that's what makes it unique, I think. I don't know if he had to write any custom software with the API for the HyperDecks. I do note that 4 HyperDecks in a case that small are going to be very noisy because the fans are very noisy in the HyperDeck Minis.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
And hot. Caleb does nice stuff, and everything I've ever seen him build is not a hack. It's good stuff. And that thing has removable SSDs and time code. He had me at time code.
Go ahead, Jeff. Can't hear you, Jeff.
Double click. Courtney, that magic button is a USB KVM, effectively. And so it's just moving the USB side from one side to the other.
Right.
I have to say that I think it's really cool. What he put together is really cool. The handwriting across the top, though, makes me a little like P-Touch. This is really nice. They didn't pay anything for this, but if you're going to put permanent marker, it's one thing if you're saying, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a grease pencil up here and just write something in there to make that, while I work on it. But if you're going to a permanent marker, get a printer, print it across the top. The only other thing that I saw was passing unbalanced audio. I know that's what they might have in there, but I don't know. In having a bunch of little 1/8" jack things on the back is not something that I would probably take on for a host of reasons. But the front end looks good. Next question.
Next one comes from Chris Fenwick here on the panel from Half Moon Bay, California. Continuity camera on the Mac and OBS. Can I explain what I'm seeing?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah. Excuse me, Alex, I know you hate OBS on the Mac, but actually, I don't think you're a big fan at all.
I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I think that's such a large word. I just don't think it's stable. We have a lot of people in our lives that we don't hate. We just don't think they're stable. And so the thing is that's the thing. I pity it, but I don't hate it. I just want to set the record straight.
So in the OBS, when I was playing around with it the other day, and it dawned on me that with some new update of the iPhone operating system, my phone shows up as a possible camera in every pull-down menu where I can choose a camera. And I thought, oh, that's kind of interesting. And I use it sometimes, and I'll go to Zoom, and I'll do it, I'll select it, and then I'll wait for a second, and then I hold my phone up if I want to show somebody something I'm working on. But what I did is I made a OBS scene that just has that phone. And what's interesting is when I activate that scene with my Stream Deck, actually here, I can show you this. Oh, hold on, I should have planned this ahead. Go to this setting. Yeah. So when I activate that scene on my Stream Deck by just hitting that button, it launches the continuity camera. So I'm not supposed to show that. It launches the continuity camera, and there it is. Now, here's what's super interesting. Actually, let me pull a window out of the view here. What's really interesting is there's me and the wife. When I rotate the camera 90 degrees, it just zooms out. It doesn't rotate the image, it just zooms out. And it's always on a horizontal view. Boom, boom. That's what I'm doing. And I thought that was super interesting. There it is holding the phone horizontal. There it is holding the phone vertical. And what's cool is my favorite feature is you can't shoot Dutch angles, which I hate. Because it just starts the zoom process. But what's nice about it from a feature standpoint, like I used to use the HDNDI, HDXNDI, blah, blah, blah. But you had to go set it and wait for it to launch. I literally just hit this button on the Stream Deck, which launches that scene in the OBS, and immediately the phone is in my switcher, which I thought was really cool. And then when I noticed the rotation thing, I was like, that's really interesting. I don't know how or why they're doing it. Somebody mentioned pre-show that it might be somewhat the same methodology that Blackmagic is using. Maybe Apple's built it into the phone, but I just thought it was super cool that it was so quick to, it's one button away. And then once I've launched it, I see this screen on my phone. But it's just an app basically running, and I can swipe away to it and go and text somebody or something. I just thought it was a fun feature, how quickly it was to get a handheld camera at a desktop like this.
You know, a lot of us talk about the fact that the number one reason we buy a new phone is because of the camera, and it feels like Apple is leaning all the way into that. Like we have we're gonna just expend all the money on all the different features we could do to make sure that your camera is in every way, shape, or form. The camera on your phone is being used. You know,
it's super exciting. I mean, wasn't it like almost immediately that the iPhone was the number one camera on Facebook, even like 10 years ago, you know, back in 2007?
Yeah, it is now, because 87% of people under 18 are using an iPhone. So now it kind of takes over everything that it hits. Go ahead, Tlaloc.
Yeah, I didn't know if I should jump in on this this question for
you're on
himself.
the panel.
But here's the thing. The other day I did a very long road trip, and I was bored, and I was hanging out with the group, you know, with the community. And I was like, well, what if I could get some really good audio and maybe some better video in my car while I was driving? So I used continuity camera to my laptop and hooked up to my hotspot via USB on the phone, and then used this mic and my mix pre with noise assist, and turned noise assist way up. And if the road was good enough, people said it was acceptable. If the minute I came into Texas, though, it was like, but anyway.
Too much. There's more. Mix pre is amazing, but not a miracle worker. Yeah.
That's right. And it was funny. And so a continuity camera worked really well. But I don't know if it's trying to do some stabilization that was not enough. And so it was super swimmy. Right. Or if it's not doing it, it was just swimmy because of the situation. So the next thing I'm thinking about is how to get like a nice kind of actual good
gimbal
steady situation going on there. But, you know, I mean, it was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, go Jeff.
Is there any chance, Chris, that you could help us figure out what that setting is in the app to make the camera always stay in a landscape? Because I think that's a sellable item, 100%. If there's any way possible, please.
I don't know. I will say this, Tlaloc, this is something that I just, I think this will work. Yeah, this is what I've been threatening to build this system in my truck for a couple of years now. I want a touch display. I'm going to put a Mac Mini in the center console and multiple cameras so that I can show the view, and while you're at it, a rear view would be nice.
Oh, totally. And then, right there with you.
And then when you're off road, I want to put a camera in every wheel well so I can align the tires on stuff.
Exactly.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Sure, you guys are so far behind.
When you run into the car in front of you because you're playing with the switcher, you'll have it covered on 4 cameras for the police. Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, I'm with Jeff. I think if they could make on all smartphones, build into it, unless you're on Instagram or whatever, TikTok or whatever one requires vertical video, that the default setting would be that regardless of how you're holding your phone, it records a horizontal input. Because I am so tired of seeing video on about 90% of every newscast that's captured by somebody on the scene off their smartphone, held vertically, when you could see so much more if they just turned it sideways. Why not?
Well, that's a really important point about the Blackmagic app. That is exactly what the Blackmagic app does. So, yeah.
But the Blackmagic doesn't give you 1920 by 1080. It gives you 1080 by something. Or it's a weird number.
What? When you turn it?
When you do a vertical, hold it vertical, but record landscape, it is not 1920 by 1080.
That's good to know.
And it should be because it's got the resolution. Like it's got a 4K sensor in there, so it should be able to grab onto that. Just center cut it.
Okay, then don't take my word for it. Do a test before you depend on it.
I'm not saying that it is. I'm saying that they should be doing that. Anyway, next question.
Next one comes to us from Mike Edwards in Brooklyn. Panel, I have about 15 Unifi access points going into a Netgear 4250 switch. To master control these, would you recommend purchasing a unified controller or purchasing a console? What makes the most sense? And that's from the QR codes.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'm curious, Mike, is if you're coming from the Unifi camp, like, maybe replacing switches, and that's what we did. We had all the radios or the access points, and so we started repurposing them. The main thing that we found is we have to start over, and you do need a controller. Ours is a cloud controller, and that means I needed a USG also in the plan, which is their gateway. I had to go into the USG, turn off all the DHCP, most of the VLANs I deleted, but basically set it up so that it was only talking to the VLAN that I was using for the access points. Hopefully you don't need the access points to use multiple SSIDs and multiple VLANs, because that is more complicated to do, especially marrying the output of the USG or the Unifi controller and the 4250 VLAN structure. It took a lot of finagling to finally get ours to work. If you want to give me a call sometime, reach out on Discord or whatever, I could show you what we did in our back end just to see if it helps. But it was a major pain. It was so much pain. I started buying Netgear access points just so that I had one place to deal with everything. And also Peplink is what we're using as a router. So we have a mixture of Netgear, some Netgear, but most of them are now Peplink because it's just easier to admin them.
Next question.
Daniel Goldstein in Baltimore, Maryland. When creating on-premises Windows appliances, for example, vMix, Central Control, etc., what flavor of Windows do you use? How do you prevent automatic updates, weird Windows audio things, and so forth from causing mischief?
Go, Jeff.
We've moved to Windows 11 on just about everything that we can. There is significant differences in the network stack that make it better, especially if you're using 10 gig connections. So that's where we're starting, and then we do turn off a lot of the junk. But there's a long list, and there's a couple of sites that are available online that we found. Tom's Hardware is one that has a good list of turn this off if you want a better experience.
Go ahead, Alex.
It's been a while since I've used Windows, but as I've recently purchased some Windows 11 boxes, one thing I've discovered is you need to make sure you are using Windows 11 Pro, not the home version, because you cannot permanently turn off the automatic updates on the regular version.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, you can't permanently turn it off in the Pro version either. You can turn it off. You can disable it for 30 days, though. That comes in handy right before you start something. But also the Mixer app in Windows 11 is a lot better. You do have this situation where you can go into the settings and you see the sound levels for each app out there, and you can determine its input and its output. So every app that's running, so you can take your system sounds like I have and turn them down so you don't hear those little notification sounds in the middle of your show, so that you can limit, if that's what you're talking about, the Windows audio things problem, weird Windows audio things. If that's what you're talking about, that's how you mute those things that you don't want to interrupt your show itself with audio notification noises.
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was going to follow up with yes, Pro version. Yes, it's the only version I ever use, Windows 10 Pro or 11 Pro, because there is a difference in networking side, on the networking side, and ability to share files and such between Pro and Home. Definitely go Pro.
Next question.
Next one, comes to us from Al Trivet in Carmichael, California. Any thoughts on Audio Hijack's new speech-to-text transcription for Mac? And he's got the link.
Amazing. I haven't tested it yet, but wow. Like the idea that you can, I'm sorry, but Audio Hijack is just such a low-level app on a Mac that you can go, oh, I'm just going to add this, and I'm just going to add another little node, and it's going to spit out text. That's pretty slick. Go ahead, Chris.
So yeah, I saw this question this morning, and I went and I did have to update my Hijack, the plug, the chiclet or the block they call it is called Transcribe. Have you played with it at all, Alex?
Nope. I just saw it on this message. I got ahead of it and got into it.
It's pretty simple. This I'll give you. I'll tell you what. I'll hit run. So it's now recording. So Alex, go ahead and talk to me. Do some dialogue.
We are glad that Dauphin is so pleasant with us. As present in your pains, we thank you for. When we matched our rackets to these balls, we will in France, by God's grace, play a set shall strike his father's crown into the hazard. That's my standard test.
Okay, so what you do is
I gave it really hard
that.
stuff because I gave it Shakespeare.
I know.
So it's going to be like,
So
I have no idea what
this little pencil spins while it's working on it. And I will break into the show when it's done.
Okay, it'll probably be garbly because I gave it.
This thing is wicked slow. It's really slow.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
It's super slow. But I will let you know when it's done.
Maybe you'll look up the original Shakespeare and just substitute that. That'd be cool.
Yeah, exactly.
It may not understand Alex's Shakespearean accent either.
Exactly.
Shakespeare acceleration.
Yeah, exactly. I will say we started experimenting within 090. We started experimenting with the summaries from Zoom. Wow, are they good? Like it's so it's not a transcription. It's literally a summary of everything that you talked about. And as someone who, the reason that it's so important is it's someone who I like to be present in a meeting. I don't want to be sitting there typing and talking and typing and talking. So usually somebody else is in the meeting with me so that I can just be there and they write down what we talked about. But then somebody forgets something or they were doing, whatever had happened. This never has that problem. And if you're in a, if people are willing to have the thing on, we're having it on for our stuff, it grabs those notes really well. So it's not straight transcription. It's actually transcribing it and then summarizing it and then breaking it into blocks. It's crazy.
Now, one thing that this will do is you can set up multiple chiclets, multiple blocks, multiple input devices. And in the transcription, it will say, this is from input X, and this is what he said.
Yeah, it's good. Go ahead, Tlaloc.
The Zoom AI assistant you're talking about will also look at what you're talking about, and if somebody says I need to fly to XYZ, I've done this with some of my tests that I have to do for Opera, and I got to fly at this time, and it'll make a list of things that each individual person in the meeting need to do, including get your flights to go XYZ. It's quite amazing.
It's really, there's a lot of things that people push that is, all these crazy things AI will do, but it's a lot of times it's these little things that have people go, oh, okay, that's cool. And you can make it work a lot more effectively. Like it was, someone asked me what would you do with AR in a stadium? And I was like, I just need to know where the hot dogs are, where the restrooms are, and the exits. If you build, you don't need eagles flying over or anything else. Just give me an AR solution that just gets me to the three things that I need, and I'll be super excited, and then I'll use it all the time, and then you can add the other stuff if you want. Next question.
Sean Johnson in New York comes up next. What essential services does the panel believe production companies and studios should offer to clients in 2024, considering current trends? That's another QR question.
Go ahead, Tlaloc.
I think probably the number one thing is comms. Weirdly enough, I think if you don't have comms in your pipeline, then you aren't giving the talent the possibility of doing the right thing. You know what I mean? And so, and also just by talent, I don't just mean the people on the camera. I mean all of the talent that you have working for you that are making this thing happen need to be able to communicate with each other on a very, very painless way and very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Mitchell?
Financing.
There you go. Courtney?
I wasn't sure what this question was going for and what type of services. It depends on the type of production and, the type of company and the type of client. I do know, on commercial production, the production company would always provide, if you're shooting on stage, for example, they would always build a little client lounge. They would bring in, really high-end leather furniture, lamps, table lamps and end tables, connections for all the computers, power at every seat on the sofa, Of course, their own 55-inch monitor to monitor out of the camera for video assist, their own speaker, telephone connections, and Wi-Fi connections for all computers. And they had their own little comfortable place and a separate place for the client and a separate place for the ad agency. So they would build these, go to great expense. The production company would have to go to great expense to build these little living rooms on the set just for their clients.
Yeah, go ahead, Jeff. Can't hear you.
Button's not working. Sorry. The virtual side of this, I was thinking more so not the physical side, like Courtney said, but on the virtual side's more like Tala with the comms as being a first thing. But right after that, to me, is multi-viewer access. So a customized multi-viewer, and then at the same time of giving them that is making it truly, truly, truly easy to get into. So that's one reason we don't use Unity as much in our Unity intercoms and our public facing or our client facing stuff. We're using things like VCOM and a little bit of the Telos VIP intercom. VCOM allows me to embed that in a WebRTC player that is just a link, and that's all they have to click on. They don't have to load a software on their phone, which is very good for a lot of industry that don't allow people to load software on their phones. So that's kind of what we work with in the oil industry. They just can't just drop an app on there, and I don't have to provide them a phone either, which is great. But that interface is whenever they want to sit down with their laptop or whatever, any laptop, any browser, they can go in, they have comms, they've got buttons on there, they can easily see who to talk to and control who they can talk to and who they can hear from. And then at the same time, they've got a multi-viewer, and then I could customize that multi-viewer to every one of their whims and whatever those needs happen to be.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
The file just translated.
Oh, yeah. Did it work?
Now let's see. Yeah, let's see. Hit this button. I'll make this font back bigger.
I can't see it.
Oh, sorry. We are glad that our fan is so pleasant with us
like I gave it a hard
present and your pains. We thank you for when we matched our rackets to these balls, and we will, in France, by God's grace, play a set. Shall strike his, whatever.
Yeah. So not perfect. You know, a lot of times with the transcription though, having something that gets you a sense of it, and especially when you speak English, I just didn't have something else to say at the moment. That's like a tape deck in my head, so that I can just turn it on and play it. Anyway, so but yeah, that's good. It's good. To go back to the question, I think that a lot of this also depends on the economy. So what we do in studios are in the economy. People are very post-COVID wanting to do things physically. But I can tell you over the last 25 years that our business of virtual events and online events and live streaming is counter-cyclical. So anytime the economy takes trips, generally the demand for streaming goes up because people are trying to do more with less. And so you just want to kind of watch that, because that is the big weather system that a lot of us pay attention to, is the weather system of the economy. And as the economy goes up and down, so does the demand for the product. And the product it's kind of like the product keeps going up, like more and more people want to do things online. But you see these little waves. I think that a couple things that we're paying attention to is more and more people are getting their head around the idea that that you should be doing something, maybe not exactly like what we do here, but something where you're doing events every week or every month, not going to just a show. It doesn't mean you don't go to the shows, but the shows are these tent poles. How do you communicate with your customers and your partners and your employees on a regular basis? And I think more people are thinking harder about that. So there's ongoing things, and things like Zoom and online events make that a lot easier. You don't have to try to collect everybody for an all hands. You can just light it up and make it all work. So I think that those are things that we're starting to see more people kind of getting their head around. Comms, of course, I think as far as delivery, we use Unity or ClearComm's Agent IC, and I built a nice little PDF that makes it pretty clear of how to set it up, and we have almost no one has trouble getting either one of those on the phone after it's a 6 or 7 page document, and they just do it. Like, it just works. So one of the things I will say about comms, since we're on that subject, is even if the show doesn't really require it, we usually provide it. And the reason for that is it gets everybody into the habit. And because a part of it is getting the system on their phone. Another part of it is learning how to turn it on and off, learning how to do all those things. So, and what happens with all of our clients is they're like, I don't know why we need this. Why can't we just use a phone bridge? And then 3 or 4 events in, it's like, hey, Joe isn't on the comms. Can we get him on? Can we get him on the comms? Like, I can't. They can't live. Like, we can't go back to bridges. Bridges are so cave-like. Anyway, so that is a big deal. I do think that you're going to see a continued expansion of more events online. We're seeing more people talking about it over next year. It's just less expensive. Like, the ROI is so much higher online than it is in person. And people are starting, they can do the math more clearly now that they're post-COVID of like, wow, this costs a lot of money to do this in person. And so anyway, so I think that'll be, and there's a lot of trajectories next year that could make doing physical events complex. We want to look at what's happening in the Middle East and so on and so forth, and that increases the potential for asymmetrical threats. And so people, in some cases, we've been through that before, where people had to cancel events because of asymmetrical threats. And so as starts things to unfold there, you see a higher demand for those kinds of things. Next question.
Daniel Goldstein in Baltimore, Maryland's up next. Cloudflare, including its turnkey video streaming solution, had a major outage on Thursday. What are the takeaways? Do we have to have contingency plans for our entire video streaming pipeline, YouTube, Vimeo, and so forth, to fail before and or during an event?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I'll say if you're doing it as for a living and you're getting paid for it, then yes, you should have some kind of backup in place, whether it's as simple as just falling over to YouTube or a Facebook page or something. If you don't have backups in place, then you're doing your customers a disservice.
Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, backing up makes sense. And I kick myself all the time about using network solutions and the business class from Comcast. But what you get with that is that they're a top tier IPO or IPS or whatever the term is.
ISP.
Yeah.
ISP, sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, we often talk about we're looking for this kind of service, and we want to, for internet connectivity on the ground, we want typically 2 services that are not the same, not owned by the same company, that have at least what we call 3 nines. So 99.9 is, at minimum, for what we want as far as uptime goes. And between those 2, you usually do pretty well. On a more important event, oftentimes we'll have 4 outputs, and they're also not only different suppliers but different modes. So we might have a fiber connection, a internet connection, a satellite connection, a cellular connection, and if all of those go down, we probably don't have to worry about the event. Like, there's probably something else going on that's much worse than whatever we thought was going to be happening there. And so I think that's it. In general, there are in some cases, there's just nothing you can do. But I think it helps that we're always exercising against, let's try this, let's try this, let's try this. And there have been many times where things that we were experimenting with were something that we just suddenly were able to jump into and make work. Like the thing that, we'll talk about in the second hour, is that one of the things that really worked here is that we were publishing how we're building this kit. And so John, picked that up and ran with it. And now we still have a show, while I'm going to probably spend a little bit of time without a kit. And so that's the kind of thing, is you want to try to find ways to build, and that's why a lot of times I try to share data as much as I can, so I have more people and more things and more resources to work with. Next question.
Rick Gray in Washington, D.C. has a comment that came in from the QR code system. I have used the Blackmagic Design Switcher app interface remotely through the Google Remote app.
That's probably a comment. I think we were talking about using the Switcher app. That's great. You should be, I guess that's a screen share back to the computer, and then taking over the Switcher, which is cool that you can make that work. Next question.
Travis Darby in Riverside, California says, what can you recommend as a sub $100 US mic for Zoom calls?
And this is also a QR code question. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the Audio Technica ATR 2100, I believe, I'll send a link there, is about $80 US. If you can save up a little bit more money, the Shure MV7 is a much better microphone if you can, but the $80 Audio Technica will do you fine if that's the budget.
Yeah, there's also a Rode one, I think, in that ballpark that we've had some clients use, and it's good. I mean, I will agree with Alex. The MV7 is dramatically better than most of the other ones in that ballpark. We get to see a lot of them, and it's it has a USB direct connection. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, when they don't be fooled. I bought one of these when they were on sale for like $20. The Pile, it looks like a nice USB microphone, like a large diameter condenser. But I pulled it apart, and it's really about a size of a dime. They're a large diaphragm condenser, but it does come with a little carrying case and a good shock mount. And when they're on sale for $25, it sounds okay. It's not great, but it does. It'll get the job. It'll do the most important thing in a Zoom meeting, which is get the microphone closer to your mouth.
Yeah, I got one too. When we all went into that little let's buy a test mic, and I bought it, and it was not great. And I think not great would be the overstatement of the world. Next question.
Dan Shaw, Columbus, Ohio, up next. Any camera recommendations to record a small event, about 25 people, indoors? Thinking 2-camera setup using Canon XF605s, recording in 4K. The camera's on tripods. Looking to rent. The event is 2 days, about 8 hours each. Not live. It's going to be for video demand, and that's another QR code question.
I guess what I would say is that it depends on how you want it to feel. So the XF605s, I mean, there's a couple of them. We used to own, I think, I want to say 300s, and they're fine. And everything that, it's going to look okay. But nowadays, the rental cost for getting a larger sensor is much, the difference, especially if you're renting cameras, is almost nothing different between the 605s and something like either a Blackmagic camera or Sony cameras, or other cameras that are Super 35, or if with only a handful of people, 25 people, and if you're able to operate them and you have people who can use a focus, fairly effectively. Now the 605 is nice because it's all built in and it's going to be a lot easier, and it depends on the expertise of your camera operators. But if you can pull that off, the main thing is that you're going to get a much better look. It's going to look much better online than it is going to. It's really the little cameras, the little sensors. My kids, when they were very young, like 6, 7, 8 years old, would immediately make a decision about the content based on how blurry the background was as to whether it was something they should watch or not. And it's a crazy thing. And then I realized they were pinging it's old, they didn't call it old media, but it was like TV media and YouTube media, and they just immediately washed over that. So it depends on what your target market is, but you want to think about that. It also, people make decisions. Also, I know someone really good in Columbus, Ohio, so who has all the gear that you need. So if you ping me in Discord, I can put you together with him. But he's got all the gear and he's exceptional at what he does there. So you might want to think about talking to him about it. And thanks for that on the QR code. Next question.
Danny Grizzle, Longview, Texas. Each update to Mac OSX Sonoma warns that Blackmagic software on my computer will not be compatible with future versions of the OS. Is this a known issue, or how do I determine which drivers need to be updated?
It says the Blackmagic on this computer will not be compatible. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
Well, you can go to, they have a good Blackmagic design support. You go to support for the ATEM switchers, and you'll find this page here, which will give you the minimum system requirements, and it'll tell you what version of Sonoma is supported on the Mac. It says 14.0. That's the current version for ATEM's 9.2.2. And if a hardware update is required, that software download will download and force the hardware to update as well. I don't know if it does on the Mac or not, but that's where you can check to see if the version of Sonoma that you're updating to is supported by the Blackmagic switcher software. And they do update that stuff regularly and don't necessarily send out notifications for it. So
and
they don't. automatically notify you, so check it frequently.
What happens is Apple is constantly updating all of their sub-libraries and everything else within the OS. And they usually what happens is they have this kind of slow pressure curve that they put on the developers, which is they tell them about 4 or 5 years before they make the change, hey, these are the libraries we're going to change. And then they tell them again, and then they start warning them as they compile. And then they start telling the users, this isn't going to work in the next version. And what they're doing is they're turning that pressure up for the developers to move to the new libraries, and then they move to the new library, and then of course the developers go, "What happened?"
The internet blows up.
How did this happen? Like Apple just left us behind, and then you're like, Apple's like, we've been telling you for the last 5 years that we're going to get rid of this. We're going to depreciate that code base, and they do it more aggressively than most other operating systems because they're not going to keep on waiting. Now Blackmagic is usually better than everyone else at keeping up with Apple. They prioritize that. So I wouldn't worry too much about what's going to happen with Blackmagic. They'll have it handled. It's harder with larger code bases. So things like Resolve, Premiere, Photoshop, those kinds of things, it's harder for them to keep up because there's just so many dependencies. And so it takes longer for them to put it together. I mean, I think I knew people who were using, I don't know, I think they've improved it now, but like with Pro Tools, they were using like Mojave for, 5 systems behind kind of thing. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, the other thing I wanted to mention here, I'm not running Sonoma, I am running Ventura, but one thing to check is if you upgraded from an older version of Mac OS, do make sure you are running the latest Blackmagic software, because if you did the upgrade to Sonoma and then you haven't touched the control software in a long time, that could be part of the problem. And like Alex said, that could be attributed to maybe an old library in or some hook that they have in the software that hasn't been updated.
And this also benefits you in being a little slow on the turn. Like you don't need to upgrade right when Apple releases a new operating system. Usually February is the time I upgrade because I feel that most of the developers are now no longer paying attention to the old system and no longer paying attention to the release and paying attention to the next release. And so everything slows down as far as changing goes. So I take some time, and it also gives all the developers time to update. And go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I generally don't keep my ATEM, the little mini that I have here for running the show, on the internet. In fact, I don't even have its Ethernet connection plugged in. But if you don't do that, you're going to have to plug it in so it'll update the software. It won't do it really without that. So just know that.
Next question.
Next question comes from Sean Johnson in New York. Hi, folks. Can someone please explain the Unreal Engine end-user license agreement? Oh, my. I know Unreal is free to use, I guess, your work for internal projects, but how would it work if a studio uses it for a paying client? Thanks.
I have
another QR code.
I haven't read this recently, but in the past, now there's talk that Epic's got to change the business model, which is, Unity is dealing with it right now. And I think Epic's trying to wait for Unity to deal with all the upset while they wait through that process. But in the past, Unreal has basically said, well, we're charging for games and you can do whatever you want in production because they wanted everyone to use it, which everyone was really happy with. Epic is now, I don't know if they've done it yet or not, but I know that the rumor is they're going to change that licensing so they take a percentage if you're selling that product to paying clients, that they're going to want a piece of that action now and it's fundamentally because their game isn't making as much money. Oddly enough, they cut a big part of their market out by suing Apple, and now they can't figure out how to pay the bills. So they need to figure out new ways to make money. They do kind of own the production side of it, mostly because they figured out how to do drop frame. So that was like figuring out how to do 2997 and making it really tie into broadcast is something that Unity decided not to do, and they did, and that was one of the big reasons everyone's using Unreal instead of Unity. Unity is doing really well when it comes to doing broadcast work, not broadcast work, but game work and all the interactive work and everything else. But they kind of are cut out of the broadcast market because of 2997. But I do think, Jeff, you were going to add something to that licensing.
I'm working with this right now, and reading through that license agreement is just it just makes me furious because it was clear before
Yeah,
It's clear as like deep gumbo mud that from Louisiana. I mean, it's so terrible what they did just to confuse everybody, and it still hasn't been worked out. There's a lot of studios that I work with that are using Unreal, and they're all like, yeah, we'll figure it out whenever they sue us.
Yeah, I mean it is something. The bottom line is that nobody has any place to go right now. That's the challenge. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Eric Price in Kansas City. The Beatles released a new single today, and with it, Apple released a film showing how Peter Jackson's magic once again helped us enjoy the Beatles anew. Thoughts on the song and how machine learning might be used in the future for other restoration projects?
I go, Alex.
As far as the song is concerned, I thought it was pretty decent and very impressive. We've seen a massive push in the last couple of years towards these large language models, machine learning, all this stuff, and really it's become cheaper and cheaper to have this technology readily available to the average person, independent people like myself that have to work on fixing audio problems. So it's pretty incredible, and yes, I absolutely think we're going to see more of this kind of restoration work in the future, and it'll be very interesting to see where that goes.
Someone's got an open mic. Go ahead, Mitchell.
Yeah, the cleanup was flawless, and I watched the program on Disney Plus, and I watched with great interest when they were showing the console shots, like when they were in Paul McCartney's studio on an SSL board. They were using Isotope, and this was before they got it and put it on the shelf for a while. Couldn't get it quite well. So what was interesting is later when Peter Jackman became involved, they showed some close-ups.
Right, Peter Jackson.
Yeah, Peter Jackson, excuse
Wolverine.
Me. Wolverine, whatever his name is. They showed some close-ups of the studio while they were sweetening, and they had a filter on there called Fab 4. Fab 4 was the name of the filter. Sounds like it might have been something somebody made, and right next to it was a Cedar DNS4. So chances are between those two, that's what they were using, but it was flawless.
And there's a great behind the scenes. They have on YouTube. You can look at the behind the scenes. The song you're looking for is Now and Then, and there's some behind the scenes that you can find on YouTube. Go ahead, Bill.
It's fascinating to me, first and foremost, because they managed to grab John Lennon's original vocal off a cassette where he was just literally doing a demo playing the piano. So the challenge of separating out his voice and making it a unique, mixable entity, bringing it back to life after 30 years sitting on a cassette was amazing to me. The other thing it taught me is the magic of BTS, behind the scenes marketing. I mean, they're using this video, which is getting very popular, as a way to sell the song when it comes out and make it more successful. So it just tells me I'm going to have cameras behind me for everything I'm doing if I want to promote it adequately in the future. And that's kind of a change in my thinking. Behind the scenes becomes its own thing.
I mean, things were amazing. Like my daughter just got some electronic drums. These drums that they don't make any noise in the room, but she puts headphones on and she can listen to them. She uses this app called Moises, and what it does is it strips you put a song in and it just strips it out all into the vocals, the drums, the bass, and it's amazing. Like you can just turn up the volume up and down, and then she Bluetooths the phone to the drum kit. So that the phone and Moises will add a metronome, so she can do this thing where she connects it. So now she can play with just the song, just the instrument that she wants to play with at the same time. And when I watched it, and she figured out how to do this in like an hour. Like it was and it's a the kind of technology that we're dealing with right now is pretty cool. Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I think with all the machine learning stuff, it's really automating a lot of this stuff. Now these techniques for removing a vocalist, let's say, from the background, I mentioned before the show started to some people that I went to an AES convention in 1976, and this guy was there, Thomas Stockham, who was a pioneer in digital recording from MIT, and he was using these instrument recorders that you see there on the left, and he had one there at the demonstration. And this is 1976. He demonstrated they had taken a recording of Enrico Caruso singing with the orchestra, recorded monaurally, obviously, back then. And they digitized it and removed the vocal of Caruso from the entire orchestra. So that's pretty difficult to do. With Lennon, they removed the piano so they could lay a new piano track in and modeled his voice and filled in all the holes. But I listened to that Caruso recording and was quite amazed at how cleaned up he did it. And this was in 1976. So the tools have been around, but it took a lot more computational work, hand coding and stuff to do that back in the 70s. Now it's automated with a machine learning model.
Next question.
Tim Sweat in Tewksbury, Massachusetts, says has there been an office hours topic of the audio splitting and/or extraction like the panelists have been discussing on the Beatles' recent release? Maybe this would be a new topic.
Yeah, we should. I think we could pull out some of these apps and talk about them. This is a good kind of lab subject as well, of just kind of playing with it. So stay tuned for that. Next question.
And we do audio stuff often on Wednesdays. Next question from Alexander Knight in Port Coquitlam, British Columbia, Canada. Blackmagic has dropped support for macOS Mojave and only supports Ventura and Sonoma for their ATEM switcher control app. Seems awfully restrictive. Do production people really run only the current operating systems?
Tolek?
Yeah, I don't know if I would see it as restrictive, as more just a way for a developer to not have to develop for so many different operating systems, because there's different handles in those operating systems that it can talk to. And the problem is that the expense will start to creep up if you have to service so many different operating systems down the road, or in historical operating systems. And it's along the lines of what we were talking about in the other question. But I think it's sort of the other direction, right? And I think you'll see this in more and more of these products that you see, because right now I feel like Apple might be kind of moving fast in terms of what new handles are provided to the developers.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, the APIs change. Those are the application program interfaces inside the software that's running things. And if it changes such that you're calling something that's out of date, it's going to cause your software problems. And Apple wants to avoid that. So by saying that, look, we're going to cut it off and we're not going to drag full compatibility with everything from the past behind us, because it's just going to slow down our development efforts. We won't be able to use the newest libraries and get the newest features to our users. So I do think it's a smart thing. That idea of having to be on 4 operating systems back because it was the only one that was stable in the software just doesn't seem to make any sense to me. The feature development just moves too fast, and you want the new great stuff.
Go ahead, Chris.
Don't be afraid of the future, Alexander. It's okay. It's okay. Come with us. Also, to be fair, it says it supports Ventura and Sonoma. Ventura is not the current operating system. Sonoma is. So they are holding on to one old one. Don't end up like Mitch and still be running around with your iPhone 6.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Yeah, I was going to mention the Ventura too. The thing, Apple, since they're manufacturing their own chips and they've always manufactured their own hardware and software. They've never been one to maintain backward compatibility, because they obviously want to sell more hardware, because that's where they make the most of their money, other than off the iPhone. So, Windows, on the other hand, has had the albatross of backwards compatibility around their neck for, almost decades. So they are more likely to offer backward compatibility than the Mac operating system, because Windows has to operate on a whole bunch of different hardware every time they upgrade anything. So it just goes along with the Apple operating systems. They don't really support backward compatibility for very long.
5 years. That's how far back Apple goes. So Mojave, not supporting Mojave. Mojave was 6 years, 6 versions ago, but Apple generally supports 5 years, and so it'll and that's so you can usually expect it, and that tends to be both the hardware and the software goes back 5 years, and they don't promise anything after that. But before that, now a lot of I have systems that are 10, 12 years old from Apple that are still running. They're just not running with the current operating system. So, but it's usually what Apple will continue to maintain is usually 5 years. Well,
there's a difference between supporting it within the Apple, but third party, they can cut off. They'll support 5 years of hardware, but they can change the operating system. Themselves.
Yeah,
so
no, but I'm saying
backward compatible all across 1 year. So,
no, but they warn, and they typically.
True, yeah.
What typically happens though is they start warning most of the time. Apple will warn they can't tell them why, but oftentimes they will often warn developers at least 5 years ahead of time. If you look at the move to M1 and all the trouble that it had, and you go back, and I've seen a lot of WWC videos for a variety of reasons. Apple was warning developers that they needed to move to these platforms, that you need to move to metal, you need to move to these things, you need to move and they kept on becoming more and more shrill over every WWDC, like these things aren't going to work if you don't move. And then they flipped to M1 and everyone's like, what happened? And Apple was like, we've been telling you for the last 5 years that you need to move. So it's a very slow curve that Apple gives the developers, but part of the ride of being on a Mac is that it's going to keep moving forward. They're not going to wait for you. Next question.
Daniel Goldstein, Baltimore, Maryland. Alex Lindsay, what is your current Telestrator setup? I want to be able to see the image I'm annotating, not just write whiteboard style. I already have an iPad Pro, an ATEM Mini Pro, and a MacBook Pro with an M1 Max.
Yeah, so I realized you asked that question, and I've been rewiring my system yesterday, and I didn't have I had unplugged my Wacom tablet, so we'll see if it pops up here real quickly. Yeah, there we go. So this is the thing here. So basically, I'll make that a little thinner. So I have a Mac Mini and I have an ATEM, or an ATEM. We'll call this the ATEM, and then this is the Mac Mini. And basically, what happens is that, and then you have a Wacom tablet over here. The ATEM sends its HDMI, one of the HDMIs, out to the Wacom tablet. That's how I see it. The Wacom tablet sends its HDMI, the Mac Mini sends its HDMI into the ATEM. The Wacom tablet sends its USB into the Mac Mini. So the Mac Mini, and then I have this little piece of software that I'm using. So it's just drawing over black here, and then it is sending that black and white image to the ATEM, which is then just keying it. It's a downstream key, which makes it really convenient because I can just turn it off and turn it on. And then it basically goes, and then the output goes back into the Wacom tablet completely composed. And the advantage of that is I can see what I'm drawing. So, or I can see what I'm drawing over. So I can say, oh, I want to draw right along something like this, and I can actually see it. So that's the big advantage of having that there. But that's how it works. It's a pretty simple little thing there. And if you reach out to me, you can play with the software as well. Next question.
Todd Rains, Allen, Texas. My 10 terabyte hard disk drive is full and my other is getting full. I would like to archive the hard disk in a closet, but be able to easily plug it in, possibly to pull files like video. What is the recommended hard disk drive docking system?
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, what you want to do, what I would recommend you do, it's a two-step thing. I use something like, let me go like this and this. I use something like this, just one of these USB drive sleds. I prefer using OEM drives because you're cheaper. You're going to save a whole ton of money. And then also some of these sleds, you can do little drives and big drives. And then the real trick is to use this software. This is called Disk Catalog Maker. And you scan this. You literally you stick it in, you hit a button, it's done. It's done in seconds. And this is our archive of hard drives over the years. These go back to 2007. And in COVID, we started labeling what city that they were in. And that's how we keep track of where things are stored. And everything is searchable. Like, oh, I got to go pull up drive 219 or whatever. Stick it into the dock, you're done.
Using exactly what Chris talked about, I did 2,000 drives, and we could find anything in 15 minutes if you have proper naming conventions. We'll be jumping into how we put this whole thing together, how we moved it forward in just a second. But just a couple quick reminders that we are. We've got Elle coming for the Isadora Lab, and Elle will be here at 11 a.m. in after hours, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's 1800 Zulu or GMT, and 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or Eastern Time. like enough of that. So quick reminder of that. And also tomorrow we're going to have a new panelist meeting. So if you're interested in being a panelist, you can jump in there and we'll answer some of your questions and talk about what it's like. Even if you're if you've been a panelist and you like to sit in on it and talk about your experience, you're more than welcome to come. That's 9 a.m. on Saturday, right after this show or sometime after this show, depending on how that works. And if you want to be part of that, go to officehours.global/panelist and sign up. And you can join us at 9 a.m. tomorrow for the new panelist meeting. Now, let's go ahead and jump into the second hour. Welcome back to the second hour, and we are going to be talking about the system, how we got this system running. So just to kind of give you a little bit of an overview of what we're doing here is that we had to move. We didn't have a lot of time to figure it out. And the hardest problem we've had with office hours is that you kind of have to, every time you fix something, you have to fix it while the train still moves. Like the train's moving and we have to fix have to fix things. And so we always had about 8 or 9 hours to fix anything that needed to be fixed in office hours for years. And so we've been kind of running on that system. And we had to move out of 3210. We're no longer in 3210 now. We moved out on Tuesday, our last little bits. And it's all in a pod. But the show is still here. And I have to admit, someone was asking me, they're like, how is the show going if you keep on saying you moved out? And what happened is that it turns out we've been publishing how we do this. Like we talk about it, we talk about what the system looks like and so on and so forth. And we do that because the goal has always been that other people might do the same thing. I was like, it might be crazy to do it all with hardware, but someone else might put it together. And John did. John Wallace, who's here with us, put together the hardware. And the hard part is you can put together the hardware, but how do you get the software how do you get the software and the processes and everything else running? And so because John was super close to making it all the last little bits and pieces, we realized we could just step over onto another system that is nearly identical to ours. And so we, it was a little bit of a race but basically we went one day we were in California and the next day we were in Michigan. And we think that this is going to be, it's really exciting. Like it was an idea that we had, like someone will do this eventually, to now like, oh, we should do this a couple times. And so we're looking at how do we replicate the system a few more times to make sure that we have parity. And John, can you tell us a little bit about why you built the system?
Yeah, so we do a lot of video production at the company I work at. We've been doing live broadcasts of TV. We do a bunch of Zoom stuff. We bring in thousands of people every week. We do live broadcasts. And we're looking at doing a very similar show to Office Hours, but specifically focused in the mortgage market. And so I love the quality of the show. It seems the most logical to try to recreate it. And watching the Office Hours 1.0 and then 2.0 videos, you start to get a really good understanding of kind of how things are put together, what software hardware is being used. And I started building that. We've been testing and using different parts of this rack for things outside of Zoom. But when the show was about to move, or we were talking about all of its different options, I raised my hand and plugged a couple holes we had in our system, and we were able to get off and going in about 2 weeks, which is really a testament to all the documentation, everything else that we have, and really good understanding. The engineers who put all of us together really know their craft and know what does what. So I asked a lot of questions to a lot of people, and I was essentially dumb hands, just running cables and doing whatever we needed to do to make sure we got it off the ground. So.
Yeah, and it's just been a great partnership. We're really excited that you were able to make that work. Go ahead. Tlaloc, what is it, from your perspective, what has it taken to make the move?
So from my perspective, I felt I was really, really, really busy with lighting design in October. And so all of this conversation was happening kind of without me for a good portion of that month. And then I was like, oh, I don't know what's going to happen. And so, but then I jumped in and realized that John was so close in terms of the hardware, which I'm so grateful. We're all so grateful for. We really appreciate that. And then we started to, export from the other gear, the hardware or the software that we have or that we're using, and start thinking about how those things were going to talk to each other. And you got, I think, John, you got really close before I even got there. with JJ and Mickey's amazing help. And then when we were there, when we start to see and connect it to the show and start to see those bits of information, who's speaking, what's all the Mukana pins, all the Mukana information coming in, making sure that those are all sort of marching down the track and getting to where they need to get to, and then figuring out, what particular thing might be slightly different because of the new system and where that needs to be adjusted. We turned off a few things at the very beginning. We turned off feedback from, I'm always getting these names wrong, but from Mix Effect Pro, from the Atom Tau software. We turned feedback from that off. We turned off tally, things that were things that we knew in building the process were things that potentially could be issues, right? Because there's a lot of requests to Mix Effect Pro that constantly ask for what's happening in the switcher, and that could be a source of problems because it's chatty, right? So we kept that off and, MVP'd it forward and figured out what things were working, and then started slowly turning those things on, and then turned on tally and slowly moved forward. Same thing with the audio chain. We're kind of incrementally setting things up and making it to be very close to what we had when it was housed at 090s, at 3210. And so it's been very interesting for me because it's great to see it on a different setup and see where there still are hard edges, or where there aren't hard edges that there were before. And so that's super, super interesting for me in terms of the process and thinking about what things might be next.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that's really important is that we the process of moving exposed a bunch of things. Like there's this organic process of how we've built up the system that it both works, but you're always afraid to pull things apart because you're like, I don't really know how this will all go back together. And I think that the fact that the process of moving it into a new shell really did drive a lot of further understanding of the system, of what it needs to do and how it needs to work. And one of the things that because I think that for folks who are just watching, who haven't watched some of the overviews, and we have overviews in the past, and Talak touched on this a fair bit, but you really have to understand it's a pretty complex system. Like, it's one of the most complex systems outside of broadcast that I've seen, in the sense that, we're paying attention to, we're raising our hands in the background, and then there's a lot of data coming from Mukana that is then being delivered to the graphic systems, to the subsystems. Like when you see people coming, the super source with a couple people popping up, that's not someone saying input 1 has this person, input 2 has this person, input 3 has this person. It's being automatically generated based on the data that it's receiving. And all of that stuff and then, SPX is getting data that it needs to make that actually work. And we have, so there's a lot of bits and pieces. And then one of the things that we found during the first week was that, how important being able to get into some of the computers. We had, I think, Universe at some point, dumped out, which occasionally things happen with any of these things. We're pushing everything to the outer limit. And we couldn't turn it back on. You can't turn it back on in the middle of the show. So those are the kind of things. But by doing the show, and I think people underestimate what the power of doing something every day. But one of the things that really allows us to move this forward is the first couple of days, there were a couple little things. The fonts weren't quite right. There was a couple of things. We're still, I think the color is better now but it's still, we're running into, so there's a couple little things that we're kind of working through to sync it up. But it's one of the reasons that I've really held on to doing this every day, is that it's ground the system into something that really works, and it forces us to get good at it, and it allows us to iterate very, very fast. If we were doing this once a week, like if we had a once a week show and we hand it off to John, it may be unstable for months, and instead it was like, oh, no, and we tie it together with the incredible crew, of course, that makes this happen. Go ahead, Salak.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider is that there's different layers of action inside the switcher, right? There's the 4 MEs, and they do different things. And so And that maybe was less visible to John, correct me if I'm wrong, but less visible to you, John, as to where things were going in the MEs, in the documentation. So then it was like, oh, actually active speaker's happening on ME2. So we're not using the Zoom active speaker. I've said this before on other recaps of the system. We're actually sending a command over to ME2 to switch active speaker. And then we're utilizing the output of ME2 to call up active speaker in the show. And then similarly with the gallery, you know, that's all done on ME3. So there was a lot of, there were some little tweaks of routing that had to happen because, you know, this thing is going over here, that thing is going over there, and it happens to be called up by this particular output route by Isadora. And we, instead of changing it to what might be a little better, we're going to do it the exact same way to start with, because that's what Isadora is calling, and we're going to try to change as little as possible in Isadora to start with, right? One of the things that I really want to do is call for the different ME outputs internally, and sometimes what we do is we call for them going out of an output and back into an input, which we don't need to do. We can just call it directly from the MEs. And so there are things like that. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the regular TDs and the regular folks that work on the show were really great and knew that there was going to be some things that are slightly different and rolled with the punches. And I want to give my personal thanks to them for doing that. You know, this time we're going to use this particular keyer and instead of this one, and it's not going to be automated, and you just have to kind of roll with it. And they were really, really willing and able to do that. So that was pretty amazing as well.
Yeah, and one of the things that you're going to see is that, so we're going to be down for a little bit. The space that we were looking at right now doesn't have enough bandwidth, so we need to sort that out. And we've learned the idiosync. I've learned so much about connecting locations in the last week or so. So we're gonna be kind of we're in the wilderness for a little while. But once we get out of that, we're probably going to set 2 more systems up, one for Own I Know, then have it and do the same thing. So we'll go through the same ringing. So we'll work with John and work with Pollock and the whole team to get that running. And similarly, one of the things that we're committed to is more people using it other than us. So the idea is that, you know, John's using it, and John's a patient zero, you know, in the sense that that's exactly what we wanted to see, is somebody else using it for other things. And so we're going to hopefully be able to use it for other things as well. And then we'll put in the next version of, we're figuring out where the next office hours system will go. But the goal is by the end of the year. So you may see us kind of going through this process a couple more times as we kind of ramp this up. But we'll have 2 or 3 systems. Now, what that's going to allow for is not just that we have redundancy. It's that we also can turn a system on and off. Like, you know, like, so we can say, hey, we got to take the system down for a week to work on something, or, you know, we have to do something. So our ability to innovate is going, because there was a very limited ability to make changes to the system because we had a day before it needed to be used the next day. Now, I also want to outline that I guess Josh wasn't able to join us today, but the other thing that's happening is on Sunday, Josh, took over and did Zoom. So we did the whole thing out of Zoom. We're going to continue to do that. So you're going to see us, Sundays are going to be a variety of cloud development, where we, you know, the first thing we're going to do right now is make sure that we can do a show that is reasonably good inside of Zoom. The Zoom events is not going to do the same thing that our system does. I don't think ever. But it is, we want to see how far can we push it. And we've already run into a couple things that we've been able to deliver to the team and go, this isn't working, or this could be better, or this is frustrating, or this is whatever. And I think because we push these systems so much harder than the average person doing a Zoom event, I think we can provide some useful back end, input to the Zoom team to say, hey, these would be better as someone who does a lot of these. This would be better if we did this, this, and this, and they'll decide whether that makes sense for everybody or not. But the point is we're going to try to push it. The other thing we're talking about is let's use this as an R&D to to play with how do we build other things in the cloud. So how do we make Zoom work? We want to make sure that we can back in. We're going to do it for the next, probably at least the next month or two. We're going to just do Zoom. And the reason is we want to know if all else fails, we know how to back into Zoom events. And this is something that just came up as we realized, oh, I got kicked out. I need to be able to, and we were really fortunate to have John building something. But if John hadn't done that, we'd be back in Zoom, and we don't know how to. I realized as we move back is that we don't really know how Zoom works anymore. Like what we know is how to deliver video to Zoom ISO, and we don't really. The rest of Zoom doesn't mean a lot to us. And so, so getting back into doing it once a month means, or once a week right now, and then once a month when we slow down. Because what I want to do is I want to get it to a point where we're as high. We've taken Zoom as far as it can go, and then we'll slow it down to once a month where we keep checking in, on Sundays to make sure that we understand how that's working and nothing's changed. But we'll start adding other things like Memo Live and a variety of other. A lot of other cloud solutions, to make that actually work. So the idea is that, and then, you'll see us using Saturdays to go back to HDR 5.1. That will switch over to daily. We're a little delayed because of this transition. So we'll need to spend a month or two ramping that up. But our goal is that we move the HDR 5.1 4K to our main system, by March. And so the idea is that that's just running on it's just delayed by 2 months because of what we're doing here, but because it was supposed to be the end of the year. And so what we'll do is we'll turn that over. And so that'll all be there. And we're very close. Those tests on Saturday may not look like much, but I've learned a lot about what we need to do to tie all those little bits and pieces in to make this work. And so anyway, but then our goal is that as that goes to the main system, we start doing cloud production on Saturdays. And so our goal is that while we keep on pushing the quality to, I admit, an absurd level inside of our main system, we start bringing the cloud system up. And our goal is that again is to be able to take that high quality system and eventually transport it into the, put it into the cloud, over next year. So, and so you're going to see us starting to do more cloud shows on the weekends as the same way we did HDR for the last 2 years. So we've been doing HDR tests for the last 2 years. This is the cloud system is going to start ramping up as we go into that, so that we want to push how far we can go with the quality, but we also want to do it. And what makes all of this work actually is this process, because now we can do heavier lifting with changing the system, knowing that we have somewhere to go. Yeah, go Tlaloc.
Yeah, to talk a little bit about the Sundays situation for right now. We're using what's called Zoom Production Studio, which is essentially the switcher inside of Zoom that then outputs a switched show with some background ability and various things like that, with limitations, but on purpose, right? So Zoom has built this in order for a particular kind of presenter and content creator to make content in this way. And so what we can do by using this is look at it and kind of understand it in a better way and understand how it works. I mean, one of the things that was a surprise to a lot of folks is that that's all happening in the person that's cutting its computer. It's all happening there. It's not happening in the cloud. You're not cutting a switcher in the cloud. You're cutting it locally. And so that matters. The power of your computer at home, where you're doing the cut matters, the kind of computer, et cetera, matters. We're going to learn a lot more things like that. And I think it'll be very useful to some of the people who watch this show who aren't going to necessarily build an Office Hours 2.0 system. I think getting this information is really, really, really important for us to be able to answer in a good way when those questions come up on the show, on how this stuff works and what you need to make it work and all of that. And I think that as time goes on, when we go into, there's a lot of Zoom integrations happening right now. I don't know if you've all heard about the vMix integration. You've heard about the integration directly into Mimo Live. You're not using Zoom ISO. You're just going directly into these cutting platforms. And so as we start to look at that, and we have a place to look at that, it's going to be really important for a lot of people to understand, because there's lots of different ways which people want to make product, and somewhere there's going to be the right thing for somebody. So
and we're definitely looking at Mimo Live, vMix, Wirecast, VizRT. These are all things that we're going to be looking at. How do we test across the board? But I think that our goal is always that these online events can be the highest quality possible. So working in the production studio inside of Zoom, I think is going to help at least push things a little bit forward. They're probably not going to go where we would go with it, because we'll make it too complicated for the average. That's what we do, and so it'll be too complicated to use. But we can, but they can learn a couple things, because we do this every day. We do it more than anyone. We do an online Zoom event probably more than at the level that we do it at, more than anyone else. And so we can probably provide some input that will help us to have that backup, but also hopefully help Zoom. And by helping Zoom do that, help the rest of the industry, of anybody who's trying to do this, have a slightly more, because a lot of times people who are using something like Production Studio or just trying to build a show in Zoom, they don't know what it should do. They don't know what it could do. They don't know where. And so we can say, well, we think that it should be the X, Y, and Z, and they can decide whether that's the case or not. But the point is that a lot of people who it's not working for or isn't doing as much as it could, they don't even know what to ask for, because this is new for them. And so I think we can provide some useful input there. Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think a lot of things, like this setup behind me is very complicated, but it can be very much, squashed down into an ATEM Mini, one Mac with some isolated outputs. You can do a very, very similar show. You don't need everything that's behind me to do that. As well as, like, this can go from doing office hours to just making a webinar look much better, have much better audio, have simple lower thirds. Like, those are the things that I thought about, because we do webinars all the time. Now I can just have somebody join. I can have comms. They're not a part of that regular meeting. They're not seeing the chat. We can just move that distraction and then kind of push content to them for them to react to. And it looks better than anything we've done before. So, like, those are the things that make me excited. The next thing I'm looking at, I'm bringing in fiber from our auditorium into this room, so I can bring cameras that way. I can look at trying to centralize. We have 3 different auditoriums that we do video mixes for. So, like, bringing that all into one space, being able to manage all that video audio wherever it needs to go, is very exciting for what we're doing next.
Next question.
Alexander Knight, Portco Quickland, here on the panel. I noticed after the switch, the live stream audio became much lower in level, as well as a large disparity in average volume between panelists. What changed in the audio pipeline?
Go ahead, Slalek.
Well, I just want to say that this is an iterative thing, and so as we move forward, the sound pipeline is going to change. I'm going to let John talk more about the details of that, but just remember, that's constantly being worked on, and we went from a system that was set up that we could very easily, do isolated audio. We could make adjustments or use the mix depending on what was going on, and then we went to sort of the MVP at the top of the switch, and then we're gonna start adding little bits and pieces of that, and I'll just shoot it over to John for that.
Yeah, go ahead, John.
Yeah, so I'm not Mickey, but luckily Mickey got a hold of the controls today and has made a whole bunch of adjustments. So hopefully we're seeing much more consistent volume coming out, as well as the panel volume. There were some issues also with beaters we had the first couple days. And so when not everyone's coming in the same and we're not handling the same audio through the same pipeline, there's definitely some disparities there. Luckily, it's been a listenable show. Not as loud as I'd like it. But today looks like it's coming in much more consistent. And glad to have Mickey's hands in that, as he knows exactly what to do.
Yeah, go ahead, Talak.
This is a question back for Alexander. You were talking about the non-Sunday shows, correct?
Yeah, it was a few days ago. I can't remember what episode it was, but it might have been Tuesday or Wednesday or something. I just noticed it was really, really quiet. That's why I just had to turn it
Gotcha.
up.
And this is also why as we make this transition, as we probably do a couple of these transitions, this is why why we're not doing, you'll see all internal conversations for the next 2 months. So there won't be any external guests. We just want to make sure that we're just protecting the guests from us, R&D. I don't want the pressure. I want us to be able to continue to innovate and move quickly and figure out what we can do and what we can't do and push that envelope. And not over the next 2 months, I don't want to worry about, we've got this person coming in and we can't, like if this doesn't work, it's going to be a big deal and I'm going to have blowback and, all kinds of other stuff, which I think about a lot. I come from, corporate streaming. So you think about that all the time, so like you always want to know where the front of the bus is. So anyway, so the main thing is we just wanted so you're seeing a lot more labs, which I think have been a really big success this week. I think actually it's going to change our content a little bit. And so you'll see us experiment with the content as well. At first I was like, I want to keep the same format and I just don't want to change anything. But now I'm like, this is the time to play. So Richard Lavery had suggested that. He's right. So anyway, so we're going to play with the format. We're going to play with the, those types of things and see if, see what we can do with it. And then we'll come back to not quite, it's a spiraling development, which is what I tend to call it, which is you come back to the same place, but not exactly. So anyway, go ahead, Bill.
Well, yeah, it was just interesting for me yesterday because I realized the system was changing, but I didn't know how much. And I had those commercials to play back yesterday. We were talking about commercial production. And Mickey and I had worked very hard, right, during the beginning part of the show to get levels all preset and get everything ready. And then we came into the show and I immediately was in my ear going, we can't hear that, turn it up. And so the best laid plans with a system that's developing, that's the fun of this. That's the excitement of doing live. You've got to be able to just roll with it. This is where we thought it was going to be. This is what we expected to have happen. It didn't happen. Fix it right now and move on. And then that becomes the notes for continuing to improve the system.
Next question.
Next question comes to us from Jesse Mills in San Francisco. What will be the primary changes in the new build of the Office Hours system with regard to the hardware and software and the look and style? Unreal Engine, cloud hardware, virtual sets, new routing and control? What'll it be?
And go ahead, Tlaloc.
As somebody who's trying to make now work, I'm like, none of that yet. But I think what we're doing right now is understanding where the limitations of this system is, when and if it has to move, and understanding where those things are problematic, and then we can start to understand how some of what are the most important parts and pieces of this particular process and this workflow. The kind of hand raising, is that an important part and piece? The pin numbers, bringing in the information from the Makana for the panelists for the lower thirds, is that an important piece? Where do we need to push the future things that you're talking about with Unreal Engine and cloud hardware and virtual sets? Where do we need to have the things that we're doing now come forward with that, if at all? And so I think that's what we're starting to really kind of get a sense of.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I will admit, I believe that one of the reasons we've been successful is that we've been willing to move slowly. So we do this every day and we keep on, building that up, but we keep on adding things very, very slowly to the system so that it stays stable, but we keep on, just tweaking it forward. I think that a lot of people have a tendency to want to move much faster than that, and they want to just develop something new and make it happen. And I think that reduces stability and makes it harder to run. And so the fact that we were able to change from one day in one place into another is because of that process. And you're going to kind of continue to see that process. Like I am looking at going into the cloud, but when I think about when are we going to have the show running every day in the cloud? Sometime in 2025. Like it's like not like it is going to be daily and weekly, hopefully by March, where you see the cloud running something that looks like this. And it's going to allow us to learn vMix and Wirecast and Memo Live and VizRT and all those other things. We're going to be playing with all of those systems, and figuring those out. And we're going to learn a lot. Like, we're going to learn a lot about these cloud systems and probably, over next year. And then we'll slowly coalesce into the right one or the one that we've decided on, as we get to the other end of it. And that'll be a mixture of us learning what it can do, and how much partnership we get from the partners that we're working with. So if they give us a lot of what's happened, what's made this work has been because we've had a lot of support from Blackmagic. We've had a lot of support from Trickotronics. We've had a lot of support from Universe. I mean, a lot of them have been doing development work and support work and giving us, Zoom has just helped us, from a workflow perspective. So like all of these things are things so we'll be measuring both what we can do and also what kind of support we get from the partners so that we know that we can actually make it actually happen. Next question.
Jeff Keithley, Pizzazz, Cheap Problem Solver is where he's located. What are the hardware differences between the original system and John's system?
Go, John.
So the HDR pipeline is non-existent on my end. There's differences in the audio chain. There's also some differences.
What's the difference in the audio chain?
I believe you guys are pushing the audio out completely separately and then muxing it back together, or I am sending the audio out the X32 into the Constellation, and that's where the audio is staying from there. So just some slight differences there. There's also a lot more in the office hour proper system, a lot more routing possibilities. I think there's 3 40x40s. I have 1. There's multiple multi-views. I only have 1. So it's just some nice to have, some things that make things simpler for some of the back end and some of the more complicated routing. I only have 2 Mac Minis that's running the show. So I'll be adding a third one just to make things a little bit more.
And each one of those is 8 outs?
Yes, that's correct.
That's great.
Yeah, but fail over. Just want at least another 4 outputs so I can support the 8-person show plus screen and anything else we have to handle.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so there's minor differences when it comes to the workflow of the show, but there's a lot more functionality within the office hours and flexibility that I have not built into this rack.
Does it help to run it every day?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah. Because you get to see it and you get to keep on figuring that out and wringing that system out. Yeah, go ahead, Slalek.
Yeah, I was just going to say that the thing about the extended, we were working primarily at 3210 with 4 outputs per. So we moved this to 2 with 8. Was there any difficulty with that? Doesn't seem to be. There's a infrastructure setup file that has to be changed so that the Isadora patch can understand that it needs to route those stack of 8 people rather than a stack of 4, right, to those individuals' places. But once that's done, I thought it was good. I thought that was one of the things that we were having problems with, but I forgot that Juan Robles, I got a big shout out to Juan Robles, because he puts a lot of hours into this and he puts a lot of effort into it and he cares about it deeply. And so, the way that he's built some of this stuff, is to have a way to set up kind of what it is that you're doing at any given moment globally. And then that will adjust how the system is thinking, if you'll allow that terminology. And
I think that I just want to underline also just the global nature of it. We've been throwing out, Juan Robles and Jonas and Mickey and Tlaloc and all these folks that have kind of, and I'm going to understate all the people that have been part of this, but that everyone kind of, came together from all over the world to move this system forward, and it's just an incredible lift. And I think that it would be hard to move, but also hard to develop without this incredible team. The development team that works on this has done amazing work. Go ahead, Jeff.
Big reason that I was asking the question, John, is I was wondering how much extra gear you had to throw at it. But like the Isadora machine or Universe, what kind of hardware are those running on in differences? Or are we finding a difference? Because I believe it was just a generic PC that was running it at the existing rack. So what are you running it on now, John, that you're seeing? And are we seeing any performance differences, Tala?
From the hardware perspective, I'm literally running Dell Mini computers. Isadora and Universe are running on one of them. We're feeding the multi-views in for the switchers off of the different Dell Minis, as well as the program feed you're seeing here is coming in with an AJA box, SDI to AJA into that Dell, and then feeding that program feedback to us. So very probably similar. I think we used a lot of mini PCs in the rack. There was a couple of beefy ones that we used for Casper CG and other things, but it's not really an intensive from a compute perspective on a desktop, intensive show to run.
Next question.
Next one comes to us from Douglas Carmichael. Will any of this documentation be made available to the public?
Yeah, I mean, we've been posting stuff in the past, and we'll post it again after we do the next move, after we turn the OH system back on, because as we put it in, learning what we've learned with John and looking at how to be efficient and looking at what our resources, we will, we're going to come back to that process. And so as we look at all those bits and pieces, and we put ours back together, we'll publish that again. Because of course, what saved us was the fact that we've been talking publicly about how the system works, and John was able to suss out what those things were. But we're going to publish that again of like, this is how the system, this is where the system is now. We definitely want other people to build it and other people to innovate. I think that we're going to John's going to keep on making it better, and so I think that the more of these systems that exist, the more innovation there'll be. So I think it's going to be interesting. Yeah. So we'll post it again. I'm hesitant to do any work on documentation until we put the new OH system back up, because we'll do an as built from that documentation of this is what we put together, but we're happy to show people how we do it. Next question.
Next one
go
comes...
ahead, Tlaloc. Before we jump in, Tlaloc, you had one last thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that, we should document the system that is office hours, right? Like we should document the system that is office hours, and then those folks that are volunteering their equipment, time, money, etc., we should be a little more careful about. And that's pretty much the way I would see it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. Next question.
Eduardo Augenstein out of Panama. John Wallace, which is the video you watched that inspired you to set up your own rack?
Go ahead, John.
I don't know the episode number, but it's definitely when Tlaloc and Richard Lavery called for the OH 2.0 migration. It's where a lot of it kind of was exposed. They went through a lot of the, I think, Isidore patch, as well as some of the hardware that's being used. And then that really helped me nail down kind of what the basics of the show consist of. Leveraging the SPX graphics, understanding what universe is, how the TDs are controlling that remotely. Those are the things that really are the key pieces for me of how the show works and is remotely controlled.
Next question.
Alexander Knight, Port Coquitlam here on the panel. What kind of bandwidth does office hours need? Is there fiber at the new facility?
Go, John.
I do have 2 10 gig links on the circuits that I'm using for this show. It's way overkill. You could get away with 100 megs up, down, and you would be fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we have seen office hours with our services, with the number of things that we put out. When we have a large panel, we hit about 120, 130. So that's now, in my eyes, when I see 130 megs utilization, I immediately go to, I need 250 megs of connectivity. And that's actually, it's not because of us that we're limited to where we're moving, because 090 actually needs at least that for some of the shows that we're doing. And so that's the, that's that process. So yeah, so we're, that's what we're trying to figure out right now, but yeah, I would say 250 megs a second is what you need to run this kind of show on the ground, or again, and we're going to be researching a lot of cloud solutions as we move forward. Next question.
Next one comes to us from Dick Brewer in GT and Guatemala, looks like. Definitely the use of recovery nodes has been a technological leap. Will you upgrade redundancy to high availability? And what milestones do you consider to have been the most significant since the beginning of office hours?
Go ahead, John.
I think the coolest thing that for me would be having Universe be able to talk to both systems at the same time, instead of the redundant feed of office hours coming out from the same location, having that redundant feed come from my system or Office Hours 3.0. Those are the things I think would be the coolest thing to see, and provide true geo redundancy for a show, which I don't think anybody's doing.
Yeah, I'm definitely, I think that's something that I'm really excited about, is the idea. And, literally we could get to a point where, and we'd have to figure this out, where the primary is coming from one location, the backup's going to another location into YouTube. And it's just, those are the two encodes, and it can just fall over. Now, that's where we have to find parity, and we probably end up doing side-by-sides to just say, are we getting exactly the same thing? But I love the idea of being able to have 1, 2, or even 3 being able to get the same commands and just simply do it. And that is one of the interesting, powerful things about what we've, with the universe and how it's set up and everything else, is that shouldn't be that big of a deal to shunt it. And the fact that all the controls are in one place and then the brains are somewhere else makes it a little bit more straightforward. Go, Tlaloc.
Yeah, I want to touch on, well, first of all, yeah, having Universe controlling a couple of different nodes would be amazing. I think it'd be really, really great. And it's something that we've thought a little bit about, and how would that happen? It hasn't been solved yet. But the other part of the question was, what were the milestones that were significant in the process up till now? And I think it's funny. I think some of them are not ones that are necessarily part of the office hours infrastructure. The work with Accidental, the process with Todd Reynolds, all these things are, personally for me, things that break me outside of what I think is possible to knowing that what is actually possible, or not what is actually possible, but the fact that there are other things that can potentially work, and that I can think outside of the box that I've put myself in already. And I think those things are the milestones that are really important about a process and a group like this, so that we don't try to lock ourselves into what is happening. We try to see what can happen. And that's hard to do, right? Because on the other side, we want to have a good show that doesn't end up having a black frame in it, or, there's all these reasons to not do that too. So, but finding that balancing edge, I think is brilliant. And I think it's what's important. And I think, I think all of the people that have kind of got on a limb, even with their own gear, and with their own system, and with their own, theater, the Accidental Theater is just very gracious, to bringing people in. So I think those are the milestones, is those times when we say, well, couldn't do this before, but let's see if we can.
You go, Jeff.
Having done this redundancy concept myself in our cloud productions that we do, that is definitely something I think we should look forward in, and shouldn't be that big a lift. I would think, if Universe is more of just the control level. We don't use Universe ourselves in doing this. We use central control. And just recently, Joe did a demo with running 8 simultaneous versions of vMix, and they were all being controlled from one control interface. So it absolutely can be done to multiple destinations. And I think we should definitely pursue this, because having redundancy is, well, it's smart if you're live.
Yeah, absolutely. Go, John.
Yeah, I think the other thing to kind of consider, as far as the most significant like update, like the fact that I did it means that the show works. Like, there's people experimenting. Not that it's me, but I'm not a video guy at all. I've been put in a position where I'm responsible for doing a whole bunch of video stuff, and so I'm just trying to figure it out. This show pushed me to really kind of start learning and break into the Blackmagic gear. We were doing a lot of stuff in Live Stream Studio before, and dealing with the hardware wares of running it on a Windows machine. And so just seeing everything else that's happening, seeing the good quality that's coming out of the show, pushed me to start purchasing this stuff, and it's made our productions around our office so much better.
Yeah, and that's exactly why the show is here. Is to do that, is to empower people and hopefully inspire them at times to kind of keep moving forward there. I think, when I think about the milestones, I think, one of the milestones was moving to the panel view, which, I have to admit that I'm used to our show now, and other people have said this before, but I cannot watch roundtables like at I can't watch like people on a stage anymore where someone says, okay, who wants to answer the question, or who's ready to do it, or this kind of random whatever. I find excruciating, to be part of that and to watch it. And so, and I think that that's one move. When Jonathan and Andy were in our office building the very first version of this, you could tell that this was going to be something that was a big deal. I think that then, the next generation where we really got to the 2.5, 2.6, that I think that we ended up, where we are right now, mostly there. I think that, this is a huge step, forward. I also look at the coverage that we've been doing, and it's funny. I for a variety of reasons, we weren't able to cover New York, and I realized that for NAB, and nobody did. Like I couldn't find any information about what was going on in New York, looking for what was released, and so I really got the sense of the value that we can bring to some of these shows. And I think that the very first NAB, when people were starting to do that coverage, I think that's a moving thing that I think we'll continue to kind of build on. And so I think that those are some of the things that, and I think the next one, I look at the next one as moving to this kind of super high quality HDR version, and the next version after that is getting all of that into the cloud. So there's some stuff in front of us over the next 2 years, but what I realized when we made this transition is those two things are not possible without what we just did. Without being able to move from one place to the other seamlessly, there was no way that we could do the development that we needed to make that happen. Next question.
Alexander Knight, Port Coquitlam, is back with what's the multi-view monitor that's in John's rack?
Go ahead, John.
I'm using the Blackmagic 12G HDR rack mount display. The scopes below it are just the Blackmagic scopes.
Next question.
Douglas Carmichael next. What could DevOps tools like Puppet, Chef, or Ansible aid in efficiently administrating the system?
Go ahead, John.
It could, for all the Windows machines or Macs that you're running, you could end up, making sure that you can really quickly redeploy it, and they're set up exactly the same way, and there's no configuration drift. But for most of what I'm seeing, I don't find a lot of value in that.
Next question.
Next one comes from Tommy Schatz in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is there a target date for having the system into the new studio?
Yeah, we're hoping to have the new system up and stable and ready to go by January 1st. So that's our, we're going to be doing we may have two systems. We're going to try to get two systems up in that time, but at least one, the OH system will be somewhere and installed and ready and running and stable by January 1, so that we can go back to our regularly scheduled program. But over the next 2 months, you'll see us experimenting with the content. You'll experimenting with the format. Definitely let us know. The best day to do that is on Sundays. So if you have ideas, questions, concerns, all those things, Sundays are kind of our introspection day, and you can jump on and ask those questions there or make those comments. But we're going to keep not only innovating with what we're doing with the hardware, but really experimenting with the format itself. We're going to probably keep the first hour will always be what it is, but the second hour, what we do with that and how it looks and what we're playing with there is going to keep on evolving, and we're going to use this time to play with that over the next 2 months. Yeah, go ahead, Tlaloc.
I just want to point out it is in a new studio right now.
Yes.
Like there's I know we want to go back to the 09 side of things, but we did that and it's happened. But anyway,
we just don't want to become we don't want to become that the crazy cousin who's sitting who's been in the bedroom now for the last 6 months, and John's like, hey, eventually you're going to have to find a new apartment. I need my apartment back.
But separately, I wanted to say that I got to put my vote in for the kind of labs that both Bill and Chris Fenwick did this week.
Yeah.
It's the kind of thing that is difficult because it may be a little bit too deep of a vertical for certain people, right? But at the same time, it's kind of why I came here. Yeah. And so I really hope that we can find a way to find the balance of that quick and slow. And
yeah, we'll probably talk more about that on Sunday. But what I will say, since we have a little time here, is that I am like, if you didn't want, Bill's was great because it really had us thinking about, and they were great commercials, and really seeing how they all get pieced together, I think is really great. And with Chris's, I'm now like tearing my whole system apart. Like I realized I haven't been fiddling enough with audio. I just had kind of my mix pre in there. I was like, okay. And I bought the Korg months ago, like 6 months ago or something like that. It's just been sitting there. But I just needed to get over the hump. And I've been talking a lot about, oh, I should do labs with Chris in after hours, or I should do labs, whatever. But the reality is my day job is pretty busy. And it's really hard outside of this show for me to, like, I can commit time. I've committed time to this show, but I can't keep committing time outside of this show to do the labs. And I realized working with Chris is that I can just do it in the show. Like, we can, like we can do these in the show, and I can, but I think that I think that the power of Bill's was really breaking something down for us. And the power of Chris's was, I think there's something about someone having to explain to somebody else how to do something. Like I deleted everything and looped back and deleted everything and walking through it, it moves at a certain pace that everyone can kind of watch and see how the things, and one of the things we want to get better at is being able to insert the questions in a little bit more seamlessly, so they're happening all the time during that process. And so these are all things that we're going to learn. But I think we'll still have vendors come on and luminaries come on to, and we'll go back to the old format largely for theirs. But then we'll have, I think, the other 2 days per show. So half of the shows will probably look more like the labs than like what we've been doing in the past, because I think it's really working. But we'll see. We'll see if we get bored of it. We'll get to December and go, oh, let's never do that again.
And
go ahead. You were saying, Chris.
I'll also say that Wednesdays, today's Friday, so a couple days ago, it's kind of misnamed in YouTube because it says Korg Nano Controller. We didn't touch the Korg Nano Controller. We will do that this coming Wednesday. We'll finish off. I was way over ambitious.
That's the way it always works.
It was great. It was great having the questions. I would also recommend that that we produce the questions a little more, like sift them, sort them. Oh, this is a good time to do this one, and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think some of it will have to do with...
anything that was horribly out of place, but there's a really good opportunity to make it flow together and let somebody figure out how to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Bill?
I just want to say, I may be the only person who understands how hard it is for what Alex does every day here, which is to be both the host and the presenter is a almost psychotic experience. And I didn't really realize it until I tried to do it yesterday. I mean, your brain is just spinning. You're trying to be present in the presentation, but then you're also trying to manage a whole nother loop out on the side. And I think in the future, if I do more practicals, I think I may say, hey, can somebody else host while I'm doing that? Because the cognitive load is just stunning. And I think my presentation in some areas, I was looking back at some of it and going, oh, I didn't do that really well in terms of my response, but I remembered the moment and I was thinking, okay, I was trying to do two things at once because there was some outside thing. You really do need, if you're going to present, to just present. It is tough to do that really well.
I will say, because we've been doing this every day for, now 3+ years, we have gotten, a lot of people here have gotten pretty good at that kind of rubbing the belly, tapping the head, or, whatever it is. I would highly recommend, if you want to be a presenter, if you want to just do good meetings, is to really think about the panelists, being on the panel and presenting and doing those things. It is it drives you to be better at what you do, and there's a certain level of practice. You don't want to practice this all in front of clients or in meetings or in whatever, or in your own presentation. And it lets you iterate. I know that if you watch just my set and just keep jumping back every 6 months, you'll see a huge progress of where, and I'm not there yet. Like, I'm about to make a big change back here. But I'm not there yet, that iteration keeps on happening because I'm seeing it almost every single day. Next question.
Next question comes from Douglas Carmichael. How are you handling power handling and cooling for the system? Would a dedicated HVAC unit be useful to guard against overheating?
Go ahead, John.
All this is running in under 20 amps. There's not enough power to generate any significant heat. The in-room system is fine to cool this.
Go, Jeff.
So it's funny. Douglas asked this question because I was thinking the same thing, but I'm looking at John and he's got like a heavy coat on. So are you like, you got the windows open? I know you're in Michigan, it snows there. It's not snowing here in Texas, but so is it cool in the room, or is it just like 70 degrees, 72 degrees? Where are you at, John?
Yeah, it's 70 degrees. I'm wearing the coat I walked in this morning with. I wouldn't consider it heavy, but it's more like just a hoodie with a zip up. But
yeah, it looks like you're in a parka to me, brother. What about the rack itself? Is the rack an open rack or a closed rack?
It is a closed rack.
on thermals?
Yeah, it's a closed rack. It's sitting right below the vent for the room, so air is getting blown down on it. But again, it's just what's coming off of our main feed.
Any exhaust fans on the rack itself to recirculate the hot air that's in the rack?
Nope.
So,
not much. Yeah, go ahead, Courtney.
And do you have it on a UPS? And if so, how long will that UPS run the equipment? And is the network connection, your network modem, if any, and or routers all hooked up to the same UPS?
Yeah, so the network portion is actually in our data center. So it has all the redundancy we could ever want, and it can run for essentially indefinitely because it hooks up to UPS that can run for an hour, and then generators that will run as long as we can give it gas. And here inside the rack, there is a UPS that can run things for 20 minutes. So obviously not a whole show, but if in the event that something happened, my building lost power, I think I have a bigger concern than quickly ending the show.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Thanks to everyone. So thanks to Tlaloc and John for jumping on. Thanks to the rest of the panel for being part of the conversation. Really exciting. Like it was, I think I was full of a little bit of terror for a month of thinking about, like when we were told we had to move out of the space, I spent a month trying to hang on to the space, like just like, no, like don't make me move the system. And then a month of us like, oh, what are we going to do? And I just I have a tendency when I go towards a project to what I call die inside, which is that I just go, well, this is what's going to happen. Like the worst case scenario, I map out the worst case scenario of how I'm going to manage it. And then I just go, okay, well, that's going to be, and I steel myself to that's what it's going to look like. So I was just like, we're just going to go back to Zoom, and it might be in Zoom for a month. And the fact that we were able to just relatively seamlessly just move over to another piece of hardware, just stunning, like just amazing. Like just and John, we just really appreciate you letting us play along. And I think it's a really good two-way, process of getting John's system up to speed and having us, be able to have a place to go. So we really appreciate that. And to Talk and the rest of the development team, which I can't list off every single person on the development team, but there was a lot of lifting and a lot of people just jumping in and making it happen and moving those things forward. And I just want to thank all the development team for the incredible work that was done over the last, 3 weeks, really, to get us to a point where we have a show that looks almost identical or very, very nearly identical to the one we had before. And we're going to do it again. With the new system. So we're gonna click forward again in the next couple weeks, hopefully, and then we'll do it one more time. Hopefully, if all goes well, by January we'll have 3 systems that look very, very similar to each other, and that's going to allow us to innovate much faster than we have in the past. And I think it also sometimes you end up with these things and you get kind of shaken. And now we're thinking about, like, on the weekends we're going to do cloud and we're going to do Zoom and we're going to do all these other things. Like we're just going to start. Rather than getting caught up in the rut that we were in of just like, we have something that works, let's not mess with it. I think that there's an opportunity for us to play. And I think that there's going to be a huge opportunity for us, a lot of us, to learn by using different systems, by testing this stuff out, by going through this process. A lot of us are going to get to learn a lot of things. I think it's going to be, if you weren't thinking about being on these teams, I would get on right now because the ride is about to get pretty fun, as we have more flexibility here. So this is a great time to think about jumping on to some of these production teams to play with this. Thank you to the producers for all the great questions, keeping this conversation moving forward. And thank you to the incredible back-end team that has also had to roll with all of this stuff. So it's not just been the development team, but the folks that are pushing the buttons and making this happen, that are managing. We had to do a huge change in all the people that were going to show up in the second hour and everything else. So thanks to everyone who went through all that pain with us. We really appreciate everything that you're doing there. We traveled 50,000 miles today, 80,000 kilometers, and that is 397 million bananas for scale. All right, let's go ahead and jump into After Hours. There you go. It's cool.
Cool.
We're using Squadcast for the Michael Krasny show today. We'll see how that goes.
Ooh.
What's
There's a
Squadcast?
Squadcast is it lets us do the back and forth, but it records locally, so it does the double ending. That so it'll double end. But I figured out how to get full screens out of both participants so that I can feed it back into a switcher and then I can stream it, and so there's a little bit of a we've been fiddling for weeks to get it working. So I think here comes the first one. We'll see how it goes. So that's at 11 a.m. for those of you who can jump into that. All right, see you guys.
Happy trails.
Thank you, Twalik.
Yeah, both of you.
Thank you,
John.
John.
Thank you.